Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathan Shields. As Faina just mentioned, I am the head of economics at Highgrove Online School. I teach international A-level business and have done for a number of years. I'm also the chief examiner for the UK domestic GCSE in business and a principal examiner for the UK domestic A-level in business. So hopefully you're going to be in some safe hands today. Now, the best way to converse with me is through the meeting chat. Okay, there's two ways of contacting me. The meeting chat, which means if you anything that you type in there, anybody else can see it, and the question and answer pod. Whereas if you want to ask me something which is personal to me and you don't want to see anybody else to see it, then you type it into the Q&A or question and answer pod. I prefer the meeting chat. Okay, so I've told myself a little bit, told you a little bit more about myself. I want you to perhaps give me some idea as to who you are. What are you teaching? Which country you're operating out of? Which school? So let's just give a few minutes towards that in the meeting chat. So Samantha's telling me that we're all logged onto one device. Ooh, South Africa. Nice to meet you, Elmarie. Sri Lanka, one of my favorite training locations. Marbella in Spain. Jordan. So it's very much an eclectic mix. Kenya, India, the Maldives, Dubai, India again, Montenegro. So we're sort of going towards the sort of Balkans in Europe, more from Sri Lanka, Pakistan. Fantastic. I'm liking it. Right, okay. Now I'm going to move to the next slide. And the next slide gives you a flavor of what we're going to be trying to do today. Okay. Now, I would turn around and say the critical training is probably the one which is scheduled for Wednesday, the 22nd of October. The assumption that will be made in today's training is that you know absolutely nothing. You are a novice teacher who has never taught international A-level business with Pearson before. That will be the assumption, okay? Next Wednesday's training is where we start to drill down into looking at how difficult examination questions are marked. Now, we'll do a bit of that today on some of the points-based questions, but the levels-based questions, they will really be tackled next Wednesday on the 22nd. So if you are an experienced teacher, you're going to find some of today's training very, very rudimentary indeed. So we've got a lot of aims and objectives on that slide. That's quite a busy slide. But I would take the view that today is all about trying to give people confidence to deliver international A-level in business if they have not done that before. Okay, question coming in from Lynn. Okay, yes, you will get the slides and you will get a recording. They will be emailed to you, probably arriving tomorrow. Okay, that's what normally happens. So please do not worry about that. Okay, and you can use these slides. Why can't you use these slides? They're not kind of like a private thing. If you want to use these in the classroom with your students, you can use these in the classroom with your students. Certainly from next week's training, when we start to look at exemplars, you could set a task where, okay, mark that. What do you think that's worth? You know, it's a worthy and very, very worthwhile exercise. Okay, so welcome to Pearson. As we know, Pearson is one of the world's largest examining boards, and it's certainly one of the biggest examining boards in the United Kingdom. And everything it does, it tries to do with skill and to the highest level of quality. Okay, let's crack on. If I were a new teacher to international A-level business, I would want to have three things in front of me. so that I can plan my lessons. Those three things are the specification, the getting started guide, which is often ignored, and a selection of live examination papers. So you can see that there on the screen. Specification tells me what I have to teach. This is what students need to learn. Now, a lot of teachers just focus on those pages in the specification. They don't read the full specification. And that's a mistake because there are some golden nuggets of additional information hidden away in the appendices. More on that in a moment. The Getting Started Guide, that again is a very, very useful document because it exemplifies what is meant by the specification. If you're a new teacher and you look at a specification, you're sort of thinking, where does that stop? Okay, they've asked me a question about, I've got to teach branding, but to what level do I take the concept of branding? Where does it end? Do I take it to sort of like degree level? Where do I stop? The Getting Started Guide provides those parameters. It gives you that comfort blanket of saying, right, this is what is meant by branding. This is the kind of thing that's going to be asked about with branding. And speaking about working out what's going to be asked regarding branding, that is why I'd want to see some live exam papers. I'd want to be looking at those live exam papers to try and work out the style of question that appears. And the more of those exam papers you look at, and there are plenty, because as we know, there is an October, a January, and a May/June sitting. There are plenty of papers out there. You start to get a flavor for how the questions are manufactured. So if I was brand new, never having taught international A-level business before, I would be wanting to get hold of these three things. Okay, I would say probably more than one set of live exam papers, to be honest. I'd probably be looking at sort of like 3 or 4 different sets of examination papers. And of course, they are divided by unit. Now, let's have a look at the specification first. So, where am I going to get the specification from? From the Edexcel website. I told you this was basic. I go to the Edexcel website, I go to International A-Level Business 2018, and I click on specification. And when I click on specification, I see the tree. I'm not sure if it's a tree of life, but it is a tree. And I will click on that and I will download that, okay? And when I download that, I'm probably going to go straight to what students need to learn. So that is a sample from the first page of what students need to learn. And we have got mass markets and niche markets. We've got dynamic markets. We've got how competition affects the market, the difference between risk and uncertainty. Now, I've made a point there that the specification is listed in this simple bullet point format. It's done like that to keep it short and snappy, not to overwhelm a teacher with detail. But a teacher wants the detail. A teacher wants to know where to stop. And that is where the Getting Started Guide comes in. The Getting Started Guide tells you where to stop. It develops the bullet points in the specification and says, this is how far you need to go with this. And the Getting Started Guide is often never read. It's ignored. Everyone goes to the specification, okay? And that can create problems sometimes. People overteach things and spend more time on certain elements on the specification than they actually have to. Now, I mentioned there are pages in the appendices in the specification which are important, which are often ignored. Here's some examples. Page 39, you've got the assessment objectives and weightings. Sounds very, very boring, but I actually think it's a very critical page. But look at it, it's page 39. It's right at the back end of that specification document. the command word taxonomy. Now, the command word taxonomy comes from the assessment objectives and weightings. The quantitative skills required. Well, there's a 10% quantitative skill requirement across the entirety of the qualification. So I would want to know what quantitative skills they're likely to ask. Now, it may well be some of the quantitative skills are specifically laid out in the specification, such as price elasticity of demand, such as income elasticity of demand. But there are also some more generic quantitative skills that are not listed in the specification, but they are listed in Appendix 7 on page 57. Percentage changes, calculating a percentage of something. They may not be in the specification, but they are assumed quantitative skills. Yeah, if you're seeing a bear, yeah, sounds to me like you're probably on something else. Yeah, you should be seeing a tree. Okay, looking at that, and I'm just looking at the chat here, I am seeing you probably not on the right page, actually, because I'm seeing 2015 and I'm not seeing 2018. Okay. That was interesting. Just as I was answering the chat, something very strange happened. My screen went blank and it moved on a slide. Never seen that before. What else have we got coming in on the chat? Okay. Yeah, looks to me that you're looking at, Lynn, you are looking at the UK version, not the international A-level version. Okay. Now, that is not to say that the UK version is not useful, because the UK version has got precisely the same specification as the international version. The only thing that is different between the UK version and the international version is the UK version has a different assessment format. The examination papers will look different. Why will the examination papers look different? Because it is a linear qualification that is examined at the end of 2 years, whereas the international A-level qualification is modular. And as we know, there is an October sitting, a January sitting, and a May/June sitting. Okay, but if I wanted to, maybe I could use the UK domestic A-level to find some additional questions that perhaps I want to set for homework. But we have to be aware that the assessment model is slightly different. Okay, looks like Lynn is now in a happy place. Yeah, you're looking at the international A-level, IAL, not the UK domestic A-level, which is why you've seen the bear, as opposed to the tree. Okay, I'm not sure if tree beats bear. I'm not sure what that means. Okay, let's have a look at the assessment objectives. AO1, AO2, AO3, AO4. We'll spend a little bit more time on what those assessment objectives mean. But AO1 is essentially knowledge and understanding. How could I test knowledge and understanding? I could test knowledge and understanding by asking a define question. Rote learning. Give me the definition of market segmentation. Guaranteed that will be 2 marks in the mark scheme as AO1. AO2, what's that? Application. Now, this is where I feel that a lot of centres fall down. You get an extract booklet with the exam. The extract booklet tells you something about the businesses, okay? The questions will refer to the business. Not a defined question, because a defined question is simply asking about knowledge. But an explain question will, for sure. An analyze question will, for sure. And I'm of the belief that many students think that reading the extract booklet is a waste of time. That's not a productive use of my time, because my time is better spent answering the question. Those students, in my opinion, are tending to view the question as some kind of generic exercise where you're replicating a textbook. That would be a huge mistake. Because look at the weighting that is given to application. It's the same across the entire qualification as the weighting given to knowledge. So, doing something within an answer that refers to a specific business, if you do not refer to the specific business, thinking about the product the business makes, thinking about the market the business operates in, thinking about the competitors the business is likely to face, you are missing a significant trick, which is going to limit your ability to score marks. Again, we're going to go through this in later slides. AO3 is analysis. What's analysis? Creating logical linked strands. That's what analysis is. Now we're starting to get into higher order skills. Students need to develop the skill of selectivity. If they pick something to put into an answer, which is so simplistic and so obvious, you almost turn around and think, why did you even bother to mention it? Because there's not much you can do with it. So if a student just simply says, one way to increase profit is to advertise because it means people will buy more. Hugely simplistic analysis there. Very, very simplistic analysis. Whereas if a student said, advertising potentially could make the product appear more of a necessity. As a result, the numerical value of the price elasticity of demand will fall. Therefore, the firm is able to charge a premium. As a result, as the price goes up by a certain percentage, the quantity demanded will fall by less than that percentage. As a result, revenue will increase. If the revenue increases by more than the cost of the advertising, then therefore the profits will increase. That is an utterly and totally different situation to my previous example. And what the examiners there is they're looking at the linked strands and they're thinking, yeah, does this sound logical? Is this all linking together? Yeah, it's all linking together really, really nicely. Now, part of the skill in higher order questions will be to try and insert application into each of one of those linked strands, because I am very conscious that I've been very generic there, but I was just purely focusing on the skill of analysis. Analysis is generating that logical minutiae of detail where you're putting strands together to tell the story in almost like a micro detail. Therefore, you try and pick something which gives you the ability to do that. You don't pick to put into an answer something which is so simplistic that it diminishes your ability to do that. Okay, again, a very important skill. And it's a very important skill that becomes much more important when we move to the upper six or year 13 units in papers 3 and papers 4. So notice how the weighting goes up between the IAS and the IA2, because the format of the papers between units 1 and units 2 that make up the IAS are different to the makeup of the papers in units 3 and 4, which make up the second year, the upper sixth or year 13, the IA2. Then we've got AO4, evaluation. Okay. Now, at the most simplistic level, evaluation is, right, I've discussed some benefits in this answer. I'm now going to discuss some drawbacks. That's at its most basic. I would turn around and say, well, look, that is simplistic evaluation. Here's some drawbacks to counteract or balance against the positives. More significant and higher quality evaluation will be where you put a importance, a size, a magnitude to what's been discussed in the essay. This is the most significant issue for the business because developed with application. Now, the very fact that you've realized that that is the most significant issue and then explained why, that is better evaluation than just saying there's some negatives. Because just saying that there are some negatives is not putting a weight or an importance on the negatives. It almost becomes kind of like some kind of robotic list of negatives. And I'm only doing that because my teacher told me that I had to do that. Evaluation is very, very difficult to teach. Everybody wants quick fixes with evaluation. And I don't think there are quick fixes. When you're marking exams, you see students attempting a quick fix. Oh, in the short term, this is more important. In the long term, that's not real. This is more important. Or this depends on this. And you're trying to make a judgment as to the quality of the evaluation. And more often than not, you can spot very, very quickly where people have been told to use these kind of short run, long run, it depends sound bites, but they don't really understand it. They're just doing it because they've been told to do it. And more often than not, that means you're going to get a lower judgment when it comes to the evaluation, which is why on 20-mark essays, it's very, very difficult to get into that top level, level 4. Very, very difficult to get the sort of 16, 17, 18, 19s and 20. I say to my students, the battleground is not the 20-mark essay. The battleground is making sure you get all of the easy stuff done really, really well and not losing a mark. That's the battleground. It's a lot easier to get 4 out of 4 on a construct or draw question than it is to try and pick up the additional marks on a 20-mark essay. Okay, is there a clear point allocation structure for these longer questions? No, Lynn, there isn't. That's levels-based marking. It's examiner judgment-based marking. Nobody is adding things up and nobody is saying, here's a point, there's a point. Let's aggregate all of this up to give a mark out of 20. You could take a question that is probably been given 17 out of 20, get somebody else to mark it, and they might give it 19 out of 20. Somebody else could mark it and give it 16 out of 20. The way to view levels-based marking is like trying to herd sheep. You'd realize that sheep are going to be going all over the place. And the idea of standardization is to try and get everybody very, very close together. And that is why there is a thing called adjacency. So on a 20-mark essay, the adjacency is plus or minus 2. If the examiner gave it 18 and the chief examiner gave it 16, it's fine. It's accurate marking. If an examiner gave it 18 and the chief examiner gave it 14, that's inaccurate marking. Okay? Nobody's going to be turning around and saying, actually, I think that 18-mark answer should really be 17, because you'd be struggling to really justify that. Yeah? It is very vague. And it's vague, yeah, to allow, sorry, that's my phone. It's vague to allow people to have that scope to create maybe a 3 or 4 side answer. And if you think about a 3 or 4 side answer, very, very difficult to mark. Can't be points-based marked. And we'll look more at that in next Wednesday's training. Next Wednesday's training is going to be really about those levels-based questions where we look at them, okay? And we look at how that levels-based mark scheme is applied. Right. Okay. I've stolen the thunder from later slides. So, okay, we might save a little bit more time later on. Okay, Appendix 6. You have got command words in Appendix 6. Okay, those command words in Appendix 6 come from the previous slide. The previous slide is giving you the percentage weightings of assessment objectives. Okay, those command words reflect that percentage weighting of assessment objectives. So you can see here, hopefully, that a define question. What are students required to do? Define a term or phrase. That is targeting AO1. What is a calculate question requiring them to do? A calculate question is the requiring them to use data from an extract and do something with it. So I know there's going to be some application in there. And a calculate question is always marked 1AO1, 2AO2, 1AO3. It's a bit of a fudge, really. The 1AO1 comes from the formula. The 2AO2 comes from the workings. And the 1AO3 comes from the correct answer in the correct units or to the correct number of decimal places. And the reason why it is a fudge, sorry about this. There we are. Let's just pull the phone line out. And the reason why it's a bit of a fudge is because the calculate question is interchangeable with a construct question and interchangeable with an explain question. Calculate, construct, and explain are interchangeable in their position within the exam paper. So, Unit 2 has got more maths in it because it's looking at statements of financial position. It's looking at statements of comprehensive income. I would expect to see in Unit 2 more calculate questions and probably 0 construct questions. Whereas Unit 1 has got demand and supply in it. Demand and supply, I could draw a diagram. I'm probably expecting to see a construct question in there, possibly in Unit 1, and perhaps less calculate questions in Unit 1. Okay? Right, that's the command words. And you see the command words reflected when you look at the mark schemes. So here's an example of an explain question. Explain one reason why product may be considered the most important element of the marketing mix for Emirates. Now notice Emirates is italicized. Okay? There will be an extract that goes with this question, which talks about Emirates ICE entertainment system that you get at the back of the seat. Yeah? The idea is you're flagging up to the student that application is now under test. That's what the italicization means. Notice it doesn't say the word marketing mix for a business. It says marketing mix for Emirates. Emirates, of course, being italicized. And as I said, explain questions, calculate questions, construct questions have got the same weighting of assessment objectives. 1AO1, 2AO2, 1AO3. And that's how the exam mark schemes are laid out. So I'm just looking at that application just there. The word passengers. I'm seeing luxurious cabins. Passengers, luxurious cabins. You mentioned those kind of phrases. That is application. This is an answer which is about an airline. In-flight entertainment, yeah, that is again about an airline. Emirates would not count as application because Emirates is in the question. So I tend to, when I start my lessons in international A-level business, I try and I have kind of like I call it kind of like a context corner or a context moment. I might start some lessons with, this is the name of the business. let's think about some words that we could use to contextualize our answer around this business. So if it's a hardware store, I'm looking for hammers, plasterboard, nails, timber, cement. These are words that I need to try and insert, possibly into my answer, to demonstrate the fact that this is an answer that is based around a hardware store. Okay, so that's the mark scheme. What else is important? Well, this appendix is important. This appendix is important because it shows you the generic quantitative skills that are required. Now, 10% of all of the marks in international A-level business come from quantitative skills. So there's almost a cleverness there. You could be looking at paper one and saying, right, okay, what quantitative skills have been asked in paper one? Not very many. And that gives you an insight into, well, that's going to have to be compensated by many, many more quantitative skills in paper two, because there's a 10% requirement across the international AS level, and then again over the full international A level. So you know there's got to be some quantitative skills. Now, some of those are generic. Understanding ratios, averages and fractions, percentage changes, understanding index numbers. So what's an index number? I might get a graph of some index number series. I need to know that that is measuring percentage changes from a base year. Okay. Some of them are much more specific. Interpret values of price and income elasticity of demand. Much more specific, and that's probably likely to be highlighted in the actual specification. So some of these are in the specification, some of them are not in the specification. That's why you need to read that appendix. Don't read that appendix, you don't know about the generic quantitative skills. Okay, that's the specification. We also have the Getting Started Guide. The Getting Started Guide gives you more detail about the coverage in the specification. Okay, Shipra has asked a question. 4-marker has 2 application marks. What extra needs to be done for that? I would look at an explain question, okay? And I think it's easier to understand with an explain question. A construct question, okay, the application marks are for shifting the correct curve. For a calculate question, the application marks are coming from the workings. I think the explain question is where it's more opaque. So with the explain question, I'd be looking to try and build 2 strands, yeah, that contain something to do with the business, but do not include anything that is in the question. So let's say we had the Colombo Coffee Company. That's what's in the extract, and that's what appears italicized within the question. Ouch, that hurts. And it hurts because the contextualized word that I want to use is incorporated into the name of the business. I desperately want to use the word coffee, and I can't because it's contained within the question. Therefore, I know the application will not count. So, let's say the question is, explain one benefit of branding to the Colombo Coffee Company. Right. I need to make a point, the benefit, and I need to make 3 linked strands that build from that, 2 of which are going to be associated with a coffee retailer. So I could say the branding will make its beverages appear more of a necessity. Notice beverages, not coffee, beverages. I've had to do a bit of thinking there. Yeah, they're producing beverages. I could use the word drinks. Makes their drinks appear more of a necessity. As a result, linking phrase, as a result. As a result, its lattes will have a lower price elasticity of demand. Yeah, I've got some more application going in there. Therefore, they can charge a premium price for their drinks. Yeah, I've got more application in there. I've definitely covered the 2 application strands. As a result, they can make a larger level of revenue. Job done, 4 marks. Now, the critical thing to understand about application is that application has to be part of a linked strand. You're not going to get any application marks just by writing latte. So if you just saw an answer to a 4-mark explain question and a student had just written latte and drink, that's 0. But incorporating the words latte and drink into linked strands that answer the question, that would count. PED will be inelastic. Is that application or analysis? If you just say that PED has a lower numerical value, that would be analysis. But if you said PED will become numerically lower for frappuccinos, that could now count for analysis, but it could also count for application because you've added the word frappuccino. So if you wanted to take on a 4-mark explain question, if you wanted to be super efficient, the first mark is coming from the point, makes it more of a necessity. The next 2 marks are coming from linked strands that include application. The final linked strand comes from, the final mark, analysis, comes from a linked strand that doesn't have to include any application. But I try and get my students to get application in everywhere. Yeah? And that way it makes it really, really clear that this is an applied answer. The biggest mistake on a 4-mark explain question is not putting application in. If you look at Results Plus and you look at the international averages, the international averages on a 4-mark explain question is almost always in the range of 1.8 to 2.4. Yeah? And that to me is an opportunity. As a teacher, for me, I've got to focus on that skill of application because that is an easy fix. That is an easy win. Getting that 2 marks to 4 marks shouldn't be too hard. The students are just not thinking about the application. Right, okay, let's get back on track. We've got the Getting Started guide, okay? Hopefully that answers your question, Shipra. Got the Getting Started guide, and that gives you the parameters of the specification. So you can see here on this slide, we've got part of the specification, and then we've got the Getting Started guide. The Getting Started guide is giving you more information about how far you should take the specification, okay? And that's a critical thing. I want to know where to stop. How far do I take mass markets and niche markets? The Getting Started guide is giving me those parameters. Then we've got live exam papers. Live exam papers are really, really useful because live exam papers tell me the style of questions that are likely to turn up. Now, one of the things that I think is absolutely great about international A-level business is you have got essentially an identical format. Every single year, you could pick an October paper, a January paper, a May-June paper, okay? And you're going to see precisely the same format. The only difference will be that interchangeability between the explain, the calculate, and the construct questions. And that is why they are marked 1A01, 2A02, 1A03. It creates that ability for interchangeability. Let's have a look at that. Here we go. Unit 1 and Unit 2. Question 1C. Question 1C, always an analysed question. Analysed questions are always worth 6 marks. And you can see there that question 1C is always an analysed 2 question. So you're never, ever going to have a situation where the assessment model gets in the way of student achievement. You're never going to see an 8-mark analyzed question. It's never going to happen. You're never going to see the analyzed question appearing as question 1B. It's always going to be 1C. So you can sit down and have a look at the 2 papers that make up the International AS, and they are identical in terms of their structure, in terms of their style, in terms of the positioning of the questions. There is that interchangeability between calculate, construct, and explain, but they'll be the same. Units 3 and 4, they will be different to units 1 and 2, because the assessment objectives in units 3 and 4, the A2 parts of the course, are much more heavily weighted towards analysis and evaluation, whereas there's a much higher weighting in units 1 and 2 towards knowledge and application. Okay. Right. That gives us the ability to just potentially pause here. And let's just have a look at some of the questions. Okay. So I think we've dealt with the presenter slides. Okay, that's all going to be sent out to you anyway, and you can download them from the resources pod. Okay. Yep. Okay. Question here. Can't find the Getting Started guide on the same page as the specification page for International A-Level Business. That is a very good point. It's not. It's under the additional resources. It should be next to the specification, in my opinion, but it's not. And that is one of the reasons why I do not think it's read as frequently as it should be. So you need to go to that other teaching resources link that is next to specification and exam materials, and you will find it in there, Lynn. Okay. Are there any other questions? So the link will come out after the event. So don't worry about the slides. Don't worry about the recording. This will be sent to you. You can get the slides from the resources pod. Yeah. I found a general one for business, accounting, and laws. Okay. Well, there is a specific one for international A-level business. Let's see if I can just sort of bring this up. Just need to be very conscious here that I'm sharing my screen, and where I'm getting it from, I'm just going to drag this across so that you can see it. Yeah. I'm getting it from there. I'm just going to international A-level business. Yeah. And there we go. International A-level business. I'm going to teaching and learning materials. I'm going to guide, and there we are, the Getting Started guide. It is that easy. Right. Okay. Any other questions before we start having a look at the qualification content? Okay. Good analysis. I mean, we're going to be tackling that probably next Wednesday. But I think there is a selectivity thing here. You pick the right benefit, you pick the right advantage, you pick the right drawback, whatever the question is asking about. And you think, to what level of detail can I develop this? So if it is about explain one benefit of advertising or something, or analyze the benefits of advertising, I don't know what it might be. You're thinking, there's a skill here. I need to pick something where I can develop those linked strands. I don't want to pick that point, because if I pick that point, I run out of linked strands very, very quickly. And if it's a high value question, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate the quality of analysis necessary to make a level 4 judgment about that answer. So I really need to pick something which is quite meaty. I've thought it through in terms of the number of linked strands that I can develop from this point. And I've worked out that I can do about 7 or 8. And that sounds really quite impressive. Whereas a lot of students, I've seen this before, I've seen this on Facebook. I'm very unhappy about my students' marking of this paper. They appear to have done everything that is in the mark scheme, but still got a poor mark. The mark scheme is only showing indicative content. Maybe the student did mention some of the things that were on the mark scheme, but maybe they didn't do a terribly thorough job with it. Maybe they made light year leaps in linked strands, or didn't develop very many linked strands. So therefore, the judgment made about the quality of their analysis was much lower. It's not about mentioning the points. It's about doing something with the points, developing them, explaining them in the minutiae of steps and detail, and then cleverly evaluating them. And at the same time, trying to incorporate the skill of application. So that is why the high tariff questions are tricky. The high tariff questions are tricky because there's a lot going on for a student to think about. And that is why I spend a lot of time focusing on getting the basics right. I do not want to see any of my students getting past the 6-mark question without scoring every single one of the marks. It's only after the 6-mark analyze question do I accept that students are going to start to lose marks, because we're now making levels-based judgments. And because we're making levels-based judgments, I can start to lose some marks here. And I'm expecting it. Okay. Next Wednesday. Yes, next Tuesday. It's on the 22nd. Did I say Wednesday? If I said Wednesday, I apologize. It is next Tuesday. Right. Specification content. You've got 4 units. 2 units, Unit 1 and Unit 2, make up the International A-level, AS level. Units 3 and 4 make up the rest of the A2. Taking 1, 2, 3, and 4 together, you've got your full International A-level in business. Can you resit these units? Of course you can. You get the best of the last 2 sittings. That's how it works. So you sit a unit 3 times, you're taking the best mark from the 2nd and 3rd sitting, and you lose the mark from the 1st sitting. Okay? That's the way it works. You've got an October opportunity, you've got a January opportunity. Most people tend to use the May/June opportunity to sit the exam. There's the specification. Yeah? And if you were to look at that specification is exactly the same as the specification for the UK domestic A-level in business. The only difference is the UK version is not in units because it's a linear qualification. So are there questions you could use from the UK domestic A-level? Absolutely. There is stuff that you could use if you wanted to, okay? Or you could just make it easy for yourself and just use the International A-level business past papers to create your homework questions. It's up to you. But that specification is the same. So an International A-level is seen as the same hard currency as a UK domestic A-level. Shouldn't be any difference there. No difference at all. Okay. Units 1 and Units 2 make up the International AS level, or IAS. Identical. Unit 1, Unit 2, identical structure. 3 sections, 80 marks, converted to 100 UMS, 2 hours, source booklet, identical weighting. Again, what Pearson are excellent at is making sure that the assessment model does not get in the way of student achievement. No curveballs, no unusual questions, no unusual positionings. You know, that's how it works. Then we move to the A2, and the A2 is a bit harder. Still 2 hours, yeah? Still 3 sections, but the 3 sections contain different questions to the 3 sections for Units 1 and Units 2. For me, I focus on the previous slide. For me, I get my students to really get as close to 200 out of 200 across papers 1 and paper 2. Because I know that it's going to be tricky to score those UMS marks when the style of question now becomes levels-based very, very quickly across papers 3 and 4. Okay, so I view 1 and 2 to be the critical units. Okay, what have we got here? Shipra is going to ask about, are we going to discuss and assess today? No, we're not. That's going to be next Tuesday. I was about to say Wednesday again. I'm not even on the right day. It's next Tuesday. Okay. Can you explain how the UMS is calculated? There is a UMS converter. If you turn to, or just go to Google and just type in fact, like I can do this, can't I? Because I'm sharing my screen. Again, let me just do this. Let's get a Google up. Okay. Bring this back across here so you can see that. Converting marks, points and grades, Pearson qualifications. Okay, select a qualification family, international A-level. I don't know, let's just pick anything. January 2024. Let's go business 2018. And let's go marketing and people, unit 1. And I can just type in, let's say a score, 58. 58 is going to give me 77 UMS. Okay, the UMS is calculated according to how people do in the exam. So it's never a standard conversion factor. That conversion factor is non-standard purely as a result of the fact that different qualifications have got different papers sat at different times have got different levels of difficulty. And therefore, if it's a particularly hard paper, it may well be that 56 equates to 77 UMS. If it's a particularly easy paper, it may be that 60 out of 80 converts to 77 UMS. So there is no standard conversion, okay? So just be aware of that. Okay, so hopefully I've answered that question, Jenna, and we've dealt with the assess thing. We're going to be looking at that next Wednesday. Okay, so let's look at the command word taxonomy. Again, I'd look at an exam paper here, and I'd pick different years, and I'd sit them side by side against each other and say, well, look, what have I got here? I'm seeing an identical structure. I'm seeing an identical structure for section A and section B. It goes define, and then one of calculate, construct, or explain, analyze, discuss, assess. Section B, define, one of calculate, construct, explain, analyze, discuss, assess. End of section B. Section C, 20-mark evaluate question. Ouch. And I would be making sure my students get the vast majority of their marks from define, calculate, construct, explain, analyze, discuss, and to a degree assess. I would not want to be relying on that 20-mark essay. Okay. What's it like for IA2? Much harder assessment model because the assessment objectives, weightings have changed. There's a much greater percentage of evaluation, AO4, and analysis, AO3, in units 3 and 4, the 2 modules or units that make up the IA2. Ouch. I can't even see a defined question now. The defined question has disappeared. And I'm also noticing that section A is followed by section B and C, and section B and C are both 20-mark essays. It's a much more terrifying, from a student perspective, assessment model. What would I prefer? I prefer that model. And the critical thing to understand is that all of the units generate a mark out of 100 UMS. All of the 4 units have got the same weighting in terms of the UMS marks they provide. But the IAS units have got a much more user-friendly structure because they're testing easier assessment objectives. The focus is more on knowledge. The focus is more on application. So therefore, there's only one 20-mark essay question, whereas the A2 units, units 3 and 4, 2 20-mark questions. Ouch. Much, much harder assessment model. So for me, the secret is always maxing out on the IAS. That's what I do. I will say to my students, don't start thinking about 160 out of 200 UMS. I don't even think that okay, yeah, that's good. I want you to be thinking 180 out of 200 UMS. I want you to be getting as close as you can to 200 out of 200 UMS, because boy, you're going to find it a lot harder next year to pick up those UMS marks. You can subsidize your A2 year with the additional marks above 160 that you got from your AS year. That's the mantra that I use with my students. So that's the assessment model across the IAS and on screen right now, the IA2. What about the command words? Well, there you go. As soon as we get past the analyze question, we are into using a levels-based mark scheme. And as soon as we get into a levels-based mark scheme, it's examiner judgment using the level descriptors that determines the mark. At least with the command words that are in blue on that screen, they are points-based. And you can make a clear case for saying that is definitely 5 out of 6. Definitely 5 out of 6. Whereas with a discuss, assessor, and evaluate question, it's a lot trickier to turn around and say, actually, that's not an 8, that's a 9, because it's based around judgment. It's not points-based. And therefore, to de-risk everything, I say to my students, right, we've got to get all of those command word questions in blue absolutely nailed, okay? Because we expect to not get full marks on discuss, assess, and evaluate. My job is to try and teach you so that the answer becomes in the top level, but who knows where it's going to be in that top level? 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 out of 20, we don't know. But it shouldn't matter. And it shouldn't matter because I'm be thinking to myself, I need around about sort of 59, 60 out of 80 to get an A. Yeah, that's what I need. So that should be okay. Right. Assessment objectives. Tackled this earlier on, but it's worth just doing a quick recap. Knowledge, that's just rote understanding, rote learning. Do you know what the definition of market segmentation is? Yes, I do. Let's write it down. Do I know the formula for pricing elasticity of demand? Yes, I do. I'm going to write it down. So that's knowledge, rote learning. Application, we know what application is. The first bullet point is the most important one. Using knowledge and understanding in context. Okay? Building into your answer, especially on the discuss, especially on the assess, especially on the evaluate questions, always thinking about the name of the business that is in the question. It's so easy to drift into being totally and utterly generic and forgetting about the fact that you're answering a question about a bike manufacturer, or you're answering a question about a donut manufacturer. And before you know where you are, suddenly it could just be about any business. You've got to keep that application going all the way through with a variety of different phrases. And that's what the extracts are there for. The extracts are there to tell you something about this business. If you've never come across this business before, the extract is telling you. Quite a lot of students, from my experience, just think the extract is just an utter waste of time. I'm not going to read it because that's wasting time. I'm better spending my time writing. Big mistake. Big mistake. Okay, what's analysis? Again, already been through this. Yeah? You're trying to build those chains of reasoning, those developed chains of reasoning. One benefit of increasing advertising is that people will buy more. Terrible. Single strand. It's correct, but it's not detailed. One benefit of advertising is it makes the consumer perceive the product to become more of a necessity. As a result, they will devote a higher proportion of their income to the product. Therefore, this gives the firm the ability to charge a premium price. This is because the numerical value of the price elasticity of demand falls. That is significantly better analysis than simply saying people will buy more. Because you're trying to put a chain of things which are logical together and selecting. Notice that word against the full first bullet point. Choosing the direction of travel before you start your answer, that is a higher order skill. I am picking this because I know I can do something with it. I'm ignoring that because it's too simplistic. There is no number, Shipra. There is no number. In international GCSE, there is a number to get into the top level, and that number is 5. Whereas it's much more free in international A-level business. There is no number that people are looking for. They're making a holistic judgment on the basis of the level descriptors. Now, that will be clarified in the standardization meeting, okay? But there is no number. Nobody's counting things on their fingers, okay? It's, does this, in your view, constitute really strong analysis? Okay, what about evaluation? Again, we've touched on this. At the most simplistic level, it's looking at some drawbacks. And it's so easy to spot manufactured evaluation, you know, scaffolded evaluation, you know. The idea is that those assess questions and those evaluate questions, they are designed to try and find the absolute best students. So if you've got a student of more moderate ability, accept the fact that they're not going to get into the top level. It's going to be really, really challenging for them because the way in which they manufacture their answers does not normally lead to really, really high quality evaluation. It will feel like bullet point evaluation. My teacher told me to put short run and long run in it, so I did that. My teacher told me to use the words, it depends. I did that. Oh, I only got 9 out of 20. I'm upset that can't be right because I did everything that my teacher told me to do. May well be that the development of the it depends wasn't there. Maybe that when they developed the it depends, there was no application to it. Maybe it was just single statement. Oh, it depends on this. That's not high quality evaluation. In the short run, this is important. In the long run, this is more important. Single strand. Basic. Don't think that just mentioning short run and long run suddenly elevates you to a much higher judgment on evaluation. The best students will turn around and say, well, look, in these circumstances, this is the most significant and most important factor. However, if these circumstances change, let me explain, then maybe it starts to recede in terms of importance, and this secondary factor starts to become much more significant. Who knows? Okay, so that is evaluation. Okay, planning and further support for the course. Okay. So we know about the specification. We know about the Getting Started guide. There's also a scheme of work. Now, it's to be fair, pretty out of date now. Okay, look at it. It was created on the 5th of September, 2018. I'll be looking at that and be thinking to myself, right, okay, that is fairly old now. But I tell you what, the benefit of it is it gives you a template. Okay, and I'd be looking at that and thinking, if I've got to write a scheme of work to give to some senior leader in my school, at least the specification is there for me to use, and I don't have to retype all of that out. And it may well be that all I've got to change is the suggested activities and resources element. Okay, and that's what I would do. Okay. Planning assessments. Easy thing to do would be just to use past exam papers. That's the easiest thing to do. If I don't want to use that, I might be able to make use of UK domestic A-level business exam papers. If I didn't want to do that, I could get the students to do it. And I could give the students part of the specification. And I could say, right, you know the command words. They're here on this particular page in the appendices in the specification. Build some questions around that particular part of the specification. And if I wanted to, I could give them an extract from a past exam paper. So the one that we've used here is the Emirates one. Okay? And you come up with the questions. You come up with a homework activity. You create the homework. Yeah? And if I like the questions, that's going to be the homework. And then everyone's going to have to answer somebody else's questions. That's sometimes quite a nice little way of turning it around back on the student and reducing the amount of time that I have to spend doing things myself. Okay, now I'm going to have to zip forward here because in this slide deck, there has been some repeated slides. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of, just go past these repeated slides. Yeah, you can see that, repeated slides. And we're just going to have a look at some of the points-based questions now. Okay, points-based questions. Saves us a bit of time next Tuesday, so we can get to the meatier questions faster. 2-mark define question. Where are you going to see the 2-mark define question? You're going to see the 2-mark define question, beginning of section A, beginning of section B, in units 1, in units 2. It's not going to exist in units 3, and it's not going to exist in units 4. 2 marks of knowledge. Okay? This is how it's marked. Does the student have a full understanding of the term? Yes, 2 marks. Does the student have some understanding, but not really very full? 1 mark. Does the student have no understanding? 0 marks. With the define question, a lot of students will give an example. That's a mistake. Why is giving an example a mistake? Type it into the chat. Why is giving an example an utter and total waste of time? Why is giving an example taken from the extract utterly time-consuming and not worth doing? Let's see what people write. Well, there we are. This is good because there is no need to apply the concept. Yeah, there's no application marks. So when you look at the mark scheme is just knowledge 2. AO1 equals 2. So if I start giving examples from the extracts, that's not matching the assessment objectives the question is designed to test. So what I do with my students is I give them a definition list. Okay? And I don't have to write it myself. I could actually get the students to write it themselves. But I try and give them a definitions list from whatever source and just say, rote learn this. By rote learning this, you're always going to get the 2 marks at the beginning of section A and also section B across units 1 and units 2. It's an easy win. You're picking the low-hanging fruit. Okay? Let's have a look at an actual answer. What would we give that? Yeah, I like it. I like a nana. Writing anything extra is time wasting. Absolutely, bang right. One of the biggest problems is finishing the exam, isn't it? You know, the hand is going to start to cramp up during the 20 marker. I want to release units of time so that my students have got plenty of time to do the 20 marker, plenty of time to finish. And that can be done by stripping out needless words on those lower value questions. What do we reckon? Just put it into the meeting chat. How many marks would you give that? What would that be worth? Jose would give it 1. Ibrahim would give it 2. Rebecca would give it 2. Shipra would give it 2. Y would give it 2. Samantha would give it 2. I'd give it 2. I'd be looking at that and thinking to myself, right, what's the critical thing about qualitative research? Consumers' beliefs, wants, and intentions, right? That's definitely going to be worth 1 mark, okay? And is there some additional information that shows they understand qualitative research? Questionnaires, interviews, and focus groups. Yes, there is. I'd give it 2, and I could move on. What I tend to do is I look at mark schemes. And if I am creating my own definitions list, my starting point is looking at whatever definitions have appeared in previous mark schemes, because I know that they're going to be copied across. If they ask a question about qualitative research again, I know that what they're going to do is they're going to take the definition that they used in 2019 and use it again in 2025 or 2026 or wherever. That's what I would do. So that's the define question. Calculate question next up. Now, students like shortcuts on calculate questions. I was marking some calculate questions just before I started this training course. And what I don't like is when students just give you the answer, because it's high risk. If they give you the answer and it's correct, they score all of the marks. But if they give you the answer and it's wrong, they will score 0. Very, very high risk. Whereas if you give the incorrect answer, but there is some value by giving the formula, the AO1 mark, some value in the workings, that can score some of the application marks, maybe 2 of the application marks, but then the answer is ultimately wrong, I can salvage 3 rather than get 0. And that's what I say to my students. It's not worth doing a calculate question on the calculator to save time and just putting down the answer. That is not a good time saver, because if you make a mistake by going down that approach, you might end up getting 0. And I wouldn't want that. 0 out of 4 on a calculate question is like an entire grade boundary. It's a disaster zone. Don't do it. Now, with the calculate questions, they can be quite picky. Normally, they will ask you to give answers to 2 decimal places where appropriate. You don't give them the 2 decimal places, 4 marks becomes 3 marks. Don't give the correct units, but the answer is fundamentally correct, 4 marks becomes 3 marks. Add units where units do not exist, and the answer is fundamentally correct, 4 marks becomes 3 marks. Forget to put the negative sign in front of PED, and the number is correct, 4 marks becomes 3 marks. So you've got to be on the ball when it comes to the calculate questions. There we are. Yeah, you can see it right there in the nota bene at the bottom of the mark scheme. If you do not put the negative sign in there for the calculation of PED, 4 marks becomes 3 marks. Ouch. That's 3 UMS marks, yeah, possibly lost through 1 raw mark. Usually it's between 2 and 3. Okay. We know that that's going to score 3 due to a lack of the negative sign. Right, what have we got here? We've got some questions coming in. PED is always negative because the correlation between price and demand is inverse. You're absolutely correct. And the convention is, isn't there, to ignore the negative sign. But I tell you what, if you ignore the negative sign and don't put the negative sign on there, you've seen it, they will take a mark off you. I get my students to put the negative sign in brackets, because I'm sure you teach like me. You know, if it's above 1, ignoring the negativity, then we've got price elastic demand. If it's below 1, ignoring the negativity, we've got price inelastic demand. But I know we've got to have that negativity, which is why I get them to put negative in brackets. Yeah. Becomes a little bit confusing when you add the negative sign because it's above one, below one. Well, it's actually a negative one or a negative number. Okay. If the student writes the wrong formula but does the right correction as per that, are there any marks? The examiner will always go to the answer first. So on the screen that I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at 2.5. I'm not even looking at anything before then. I'm seeing 2.5, I'm seeing the mark scheme 2.5, and I'm awarding 3 because of the lack of the negative sign. So all the rest of the stuff earlier on could be rubbish, but I'm seeing the correct answer. If I'm seeing the correct answer, I'm awarding marks. It's only when I see an incorrect answer do I then start to pick apart, like some kind of open heart surgery, the previous parts of the answer. Is there a formula? Is there workings? You know, this student's really high risk, in my opinion. There's no formula there. And just putting down the formula would be one AO1 mark if the fundamental answer was incorrect. They've got away with it because they've said 2.5. So I know it's going to be a 3-mark answer. But it's risky. I wouldn't do that. I'd be upset if my students did that. And I'm upset now because I'm just giving a whole load of 3-mark answers to a student who, irritatingly, has decided to put the negative sign in front of every positive income elasticity of demand calculation. The answer's fundamentally correct, but I think they've got confused between PED and YED and have just added the negative sign in front of every calculation, which is wrong because obviously negative implies inferior good rather than a normal good. Okay, explain questions. How do we answer those bad boys? Okay, right. I think these are ones which require training. Training, excuse me, I've got a terrible cold. Training through homework and training in the classroom. Because the thing that will catch you is the 2 application marks. I can guarantee it. And when you start to look at how students answer these questions, they're generally speaking all over the place. There is no real understanding of the mark scheme. And when you look at the mark scheme, there it is, 1 knowledge, 2 application, 1 analysis. Why not organize your answer like the mark scheme? Give the reason. The reason gets you the knowledge mark. Develop the reason, making sure you do something using the extract. First application mark. Develop again, making sure you use something from the extract. Second application mark. Develop another link strand. Don't need application. Can be generic. 4 marks. Why not answer the question in the same order as the mark scheme? And that reduces risk. You'd be confident then that you've scored 4 marks. Whereas what you tend to get is this kind of thing going down. Okay? Have a look at that. Now, I'll give you a few moments to read it. And what I'd like you to do this time is to put your answer, your mark, in the question and answer pod. Okay, so slightly different place this time, the Q&A pod. How many marks would you give that? And the reason why I'm asking you to put it in the Q&A pod is so that nobody else can see your marks. Ah, someone's put it in the meeting chat. All right. Shipra's given 3. Mina's given 3. All right, so one of the things that you've got to open up at the bottom Q&A pod. Yeah, Haneen's found it. Thank you, Haneen. Harrison's given 4. Found it, says Mina. Nice. So that'd be useful to do it today because we're going to be making more use of the question and answer pod next week, next Tuesday, the 22nd, not next Wednesday. I've got a thing about Wednesday, I don't know. Okay, so 3 is Haneen. Rebecca thought 4. Ibrahim thought 4. Tharani thought 3. Okay. This is how it was marked. Okay. It's marked like this. There we are. We've got the competitive advantage. That's the reason. Product's the most important element of the marketing mix because it gives them their competitive advantage. They could have just said, it provides a competitive advantage. And just by doing that, you strip out, what, 7, 8, 9 words? Product is considered the most important element in the marketing mix of Emirates because it's how they gain their competitive advantage. Why can't you just say it gives them a competitive advantage? Saved 7 words. 7 words, 25 seconds. Multiply that through across many questions, saving quite a bit of time. You're going to finish the paper. Emirates is known worldwide for their commitment to quality. They provide industry-leading in-flight entertainment, excellent in-flight food, and world-class customer service. That is a direct lift from the extract. In-flight food, in-flight entertainment. We have got application. This is how Emirates attracts their customers. Product is therefore considered the most important in the marketing mix as its superior service is what attracts customers and increases revenues. We've got some development there. Now, what's missing is, I think we've got analysis, by the way, Anana. I think that's at the end. But what we're missing is an additional strand of development using the extract. So this would score 3 marks. Okay, let's have a look at another one. What about that one? What would you score that? Again, let's try and use the Q&A pod this time, as opposed to the chat. What do we think about this one? So what do we think about this? I wouldn't want to put a conclusion into a 4-mark question, Lynn. Conclusions normally imply evaluation or AO4. I'd want to use a conclusion in a assess question, and I'd certainly want to use it in an evaluate question, but I wouldn't want to use it in any other question. Okay, Harrison's gone 4 in the chat. Okay, seeing a lot of stuff coming into the Q&A. That's a really nice question you've asked there, Shipra. Okay, because you've kind of stolen my thunder. Can knowledge come in the middle of the answer? If knowledge is there, yeah, there's nothing in the mark scheme that says it's got to come first. Okay. 3s and 4s is what I'm seeing here. Okay. Okay. Just conscious of the time because, yeah, we're going to finish around about 10:35, 10:40, depending on the number of questions. Okay, let's have a look at how this is marked. First thing to say, before I move to the marking screen, a lot of waste in here. Product is part of the marketing mix. and it's about the function of the product. Nothing for that. For Emirates, this might be the most important part, still scoring nothing, as they are known for their superior service, luxury premium cabins, and their commitment to quality. Application. This is how Emirates differentiates itself from competitors and gives them a competitive advantage. That is where the knowledge is coming from. There's the AO1. Why has a student done that? Why have they made it so much harder for the examiner to mark this by doing a load of rubbish that doesn't answer the question? Application, knowledge, and then they build analysis at the end, potentially resulting in higher market shares, revenues, and profit margins. So it's 3, but I would turn around and say it's a much riskier 3. Okay? The action starts with the AO2. AO2 then goes to AO1 and then leads to the AO3. I'd be looking at that and be thinking, that's one of my students, I've trained them badly. Because I'd want to start with competitive advantage and then build off competitive advantage, making sure I've got those 2 strands using the extract. Now, how can I make it really, really clear that I'm using the extract? I get my students to put what when they've used the extract. You tell me, what would you do? How could you show the examiner that you've used the extract? Unlikely that this is pressure of time, Lynn. Unlikely, because the positioning of this question would be in section A, 1B, or section A, 1B, and section B, 1B. I think the pressure of time really comes in the evaluate questions in section C and the other higher order questions towards the end of section A and section B. Yeah, Edward's got a nice little point there. If I just wrote down really nice, high quality in-flight entertainment, that gets 0. In international A-level business, that would get 0 because you've made no attempt to answer the question. You're just copying the extract. Now, I know in international A-level economics, that is different. But in international A-level business, copying out the extract with no attempt to answer the question scores 0 for application. Whereas you will pick up some application marks in international A-level economics. Okay. Yeah, so Mina's got there. Maybe 3. Cabins gives application, and they've got 1 linked strand. Yeah, agree with it. Luxury premium cabins. All good stuff. Right. I'm just going to have a look before we move on to support, which is our final thing. I'm just going to have a look at the questions. Yeah. Okay. I think we're okay. I think I've answered all of those. Okay. So support. I mean, this is sort of like a standard thing. So we're not going to spend a long time on this at all. You know, there's lots of support that Pearson offer. Okay. Of those things that I would be looking at there, the ones that I find most useful personally for me as a teacher, which I log into a lot as a teacher, past papers, certainly. Exam Wizard, used it this morning. What's Exam Wizard? Gives you the ability to create your own examination paper using past examination questions. So if you wanted to do like a test or a homework and you wanted to just ask about price elasticity of demand, you can ask Examination Wizard or Exam Wizard to find all of the price elasticity of demand questions that have ever been asked across the entire series of exam papers that have been out there so far. Useful tool. Saves you a lot of time trawling through PDFs of past exam papers. Examiner's reports. I only ever look at examiner's reports from the May-June series. And the reason why I look at the May-June series is the examiner's reports in the May-June series are results plus examiner's reports. They contain examples of answers written by students, and there is a chief examiner annotation attached to them. I don't look at the January ones. I don't look at the October ones because they don't have the student exemplars in there. And it's just some vague, oh, this question wasn't answered very well because. I want to see some answers that I can use with my students in the classroom, get them to mark them, and then say, can you match the chief examiner? Can you get as close as possible to the chief examiner's score? And that's sometimes quite a nice little sort of competitive way of doing it. Yeah? Little prize. I don't know, some sweets or something, some candy. If you are the closest table to the chief examiner's score. Nice little exercise to get them thinking about how it's marked. And then you can obviously interject and say, actually, you've made a mistake there, and you've made a mistake because you've counted this, or there's no application in it, and you've given it more than it actually is truly worth. One thing on there that I think is really, really useful is access to scripts. That's the one right at the bottom, ATS. What's access to scripts? You can see the marking of your own students' papers on results day. Now, you have to get the student's permission to be able to do this. So there has to be an email from the student, or I don't know, some letter. I just normally use an email where the student says to me, Mr. Shields, you can have a look at my script. I'd say, thank you very much. How do I set up access to scripts? Through your examinations officer. It takes your examinations officer 5 minutes. And if they set up access to scripts, you will see an additional access to scripts menu option on the left-hand side when you log into Edexcel online. Okay, and that then gives you the ability to look at the PDF marked version of that student script. Sometimes I turn around to my students and say, well, look, can I use that in the classroom next year? Now, if the student's done well, they normally say yes. And they're the students I normally ask. And I say, right, okay, look, this is Peter from last year. Look at let's have a look at this exam question that he did. Let's have a go at marking it. See if we can match the mark that was actually given to it. Yeah. And they tend to like doing that because they will know of that student. It's kind of more personal because they know of that person in the previous year. Okay, so access to scripts, I think, is really, really good. Results plus is something I really like as well. I want to always compare my performance in certain types of question against the entire cohort performance. So if the entire cohort is scoring on an explain question 2.1 out of 4, and my students are scoring 1.6 on average out of 4, I've got some deep questions I need to ask myself. Why am I getting 1.6 and the average is above 2? I've not done the application. I've not spent enough time getting those linked strands with the application in there. I can guarantee it. Let's have a look at some of the scripts with access to scripts. Yeah, that confirms it. Yeah. Results Plus can be a very nice little tool as well if you have to have one of those conversations with a senior leader about results and about what are you going to try and do next year to improve your results. You can turn around and say, well, look, I've done a thorough analysis on my exam results this year, and I can see I've got certain question styles to work on because I was averaging around about sort of 5 out of 10 on a 10-mark question. And that's going to be my focus this year, trying to get that 5 out of 10, sort of more towards sort of 7 out of 10. So I'm going to be focusing on that. It's a results-driven process rather than kind of just coming up with something. So there's a lot of things in there that can be used. Okay, and there we are. We've looked at some of these before. I actually went live with this, didn't I? To show you where some of the exam materials were, to show you where the Getting Started guide is. Yeah, and that is your key place there under course materials. Specification and sample assessments, That just really contains the specification. I wouldn't even use the sample assessments. I'd use the live exam materials, which is the second tab. And then you've got some training materials and the critical getting started guide in the teaching and learning materials, which is the next tab down. Results Plus, already talked about, gives you this fantastic opportunity to compare the scores generated by your students to the scores generated by the entire cohort who sat the exam. Now, one thing you can do with Results Plus is you can analyze your mock exam performance. I personally find it clunky because it involves inputting all of the marks from all of the questions into Results Plus. Now, you can set Results Plus up so that students have got access. I'm a teacher. I'm a busy guy. That's a bit of a hassle. And get the students to input the marks from each question. Okay, could do that. My experience, though, is when I've asked the students to do it, they overinflate their marks. So then I ask the question, is it worth doing in the first place? So if it's only worth doing, it's worth doing with me putting the marks in. Depending on the number of students I'm teaching, that could be a hugely time-consuming process. I certainly would not do it for IGCSE, just purely because of the number of questions. Too many questions on an IGCSE paper. I'm possibly more likely to do it for A-level, because there are less questions to have to input. But I'm balancing the time demands. Is it better for me to spend the time doing that? Or is it better time spent creating a color-coded model answer for the students to read? I think I'm going to spend more of my time doing the color-coded model answer for the students to read. Exam Wizard, already talked about that. Used that this morning, creating some questions on price elasticity of demand. So that's really useful. I think that's a really good tool. Access to scripts, we've already talked about. Great little tool, that one. Okay, being able to see exactly how your students have been marked on each of the questions. And you can see that on results day as well. And it's free, even better. Okay, we've also got some books by Mr. Jones. Good book. Only one that really matches the specification precisely. But remember, the international A-level has the same specification content as the UK domestic A-level. The only difference is the assessment model. Same content, different assessment model. And we're possibly moving towards on-screen assessment, but that's a way off for international A-level business. It's coming, but it's a bit further away. You can see here, they're thinking about starting doing it in 2024 for the international GCSE. I don't see A-level anywhere on that. And there's some difficulties with it. Yeah, access to the internet, access to the correct computer equipment. So I think that's kind of like a work in progress, a work in progress. Then we've got Colin. Colin's your subject advisor. And if you want to ask Colin some questions, you can ask Colin some questions. And there we are. That's it. Your opportunity, before I cough myself into an early grave, your opportunity now to ask me any questions that you want to. Jose has given me a final tip. How can we prepare our students to get the most out of the highest scoring questions? We're going to be really tackling that on the 22nd. That's not really for today. What else have we got? Could you please assist in using Exam Wizard to make topic-wise paper? Right, okay. Why not? I'm sharing my screen. Let's just open up another tab. Let's show Exam Wizard. Why not? Let's just do it. Right, let's bring this back across. There's Exam Wizard for you folks. Okay, so I'm choosing a subject. I'm choosing business. Proceed to log in. Now I've already logged in because I was on it this morning. I'm going to build a paper. Right, let's build a paper. I've got to put the qualification in first. Okay. International Advanced A level. Okay. What am I going to pick? Marketing and people. Okay. What else am I going to do here? Specific, yeah, that's okay. I'm going to select all the years so I can check it from every exam paper. Select all. I'm going to look for January, June, and October. It says June, but actually it's a May exam paper, of course, as we know. Now, this is the bit that you might go wrong. You've got to go to topic, click here. Okay, go to plus on the business, marketing and people. Now it's giving me the ability to drill down. Okay, so here we go. Look at what I did there. Okay, marketing and people, press the plus sign. I'm now in the market. I can now search my price elasticity of demand questions and I can say done. Okay, now it may well be that I want to just sort of select all of the assessment objectives. Chances are I'm going to get a whole load of calculate questions blasting at me now, maybe some explain questions, but let's go. There we go. Told you we can get mainly calculate questions, some explain questions, and one analyze question. And I can just look at that, can view that, and there we go. 2 factors that might influence the price elasticity of demand for ice cream. Yeah, I could use that. There's a calculate question, could use that. Yeah, could use that. Could use that. Could use that. Could use that. And if I want to use them, I just add them. Add, 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 add. Yeah, and then I can just go to the paper. Let's view and edit the paper. And I can see the paper that has been created for me there. Yeah, and then if I want to use it, I can export it. And once it's exported, I can export it as a PDF or I can export it as a Word document. And if I export it as a Word document, it gives me the ability to manipulate it somewhat. Okay, so that is Exam Wizard. Hopefully, please share link of Exam Wizard. Right, okay. There you go. It's there. It's www.examwizard.co.uk. There we are. Let's get that in the chats, and hopefully that is there for everyone to see. There we go. Oh, no, I've just sent it to the moderator. Let's try again. There we are. That is the link for Exam Wizard. Thank you, Edward. Thank you for saying it's a good session. I always enjoy doing these things. Okay. I've just been told that the end of the session has got to have the Pearson logo. So there is the Pearson logo on slide 73. Okay. Any other questions? Keep them coming in. We can go as far as 11 if required. And if there are no more questions, I will see you next Tuesday, not Wednesday, Tuesday, the 22nd. Why am I obsessed with Wednesday? I've got no idea. Register on the Pearson training website. So it'll be the same way that you registered for this one. So next Tuesday, we're going to be focusing really on the analyze questions, the discuss questions, the assess questions, and also the question that everyone loves to hate, the 20-mark evaluate question. So we've done a lot of the kind of like easy lifting today. It's going to be more of the heavy lifting next Tuesday, not Wednesday, Tuesday, 22nd. Same time, 9 a.m. UK time. Don't have to worry about clocks going back. The clocks don't go back until the last Sunday of October in the United Kingdom. Might have to worry about it if there is some other kind of clock maneuver in your own country that happens before then. Yeah, yes, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah, you're going to get the recording. The recording will be sent out to you via a link. So don't worry about that. That comes later. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All good stuff, everybody. Okay. I think we are now there. Manage the time of the exam. I do some stopwatch sessions with them, honey. You know, that's what I do. Got 2 hours. Got 2 hours to do 80 marks. The standard tariff is this number of minutes per mark. Let's see if we can do this question in a speed that is faster than that standard tariff. Because one thing is for sure, that when you get to the 20 mark questions, the evaluate questions, and also the assess questions, they will be operating at a slower speed than that standard tariff. So the skill is not hanging around on the construct, the calculate, the explain, the analyze, and the define questions. It's constantly, time is your enemy, time is your constraint. How fast can we go? So I would typically have a stopwatch when we're doing this. Who can do this answer in the least amount of time and it still scores the highest mark? Stop the clock. Let's mark it. Sorry, it was fast, but it only scored 3. Everybody else continue. Restart the clock. I've done it, sir. Fantastic. Stop the clock. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, that scores 4. We've done it in 1.6 minutes faster than standard. You do that over the explain question or the construct question or the calculate question that's going to appear in section B, you've just built yourself 3.2 minutes worth of additional time for the assess, discuss, and evaluate questions. And if we can replicate that on the 2-mark define questions, and that's why I like the rote learning of the define questions. Just write it down, memorize them, write it down. You can do it in like 30 seconds and then move on. That's all it is, you know? I'm always looking for quick fixes, and I don't want to reinvent fire or the wheel. I'm looking for the easiest way to improve that requires the least effort from me, which sounds really lazy, but I am a teacher and there are so many competing demands on my time. I do not want to be spending a lot of time on something that generates questionable benefit. I want to spend my time on something that definitely generates a benefit and it generates a benefit quickly. I think that, for me, is worth my while. Exactly, totally agree. And that's why it's important, I think, to have training that is done by somebody who is still teaching, not somebody who retired back in sort of like 1947. Yeah, you've got a class now. Yeah, I'm just talking. I've got a class. Yeah, we're going to go. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mina. You've just reminded me I've got an 11 o'clock. You're absolutely right. Bye-bye, and I'll see you next Tuesday.